An observer looking at historical maps of the world would soon note that in nearly every age, places free from conflict are the exception, not the rule. Even today, areas of strife paint the map red, staining with blood spilled in confrontation. The history of mankind is a record of warfare. Humans have fought against other humans, and even against nature itself. This remains unchanged, the same now as it was then. Choi Kambayashi, Yukikaze. Wow, starting a video essay with a random quote from a book that hardly relates to the topic at hand? I don't think I've seen a more white and pretentious thing since a hipster in his late 20s ordered a soy no-foam caramel macchiato in a Seattle cafe before hopping on the communal guitar and playing a damn Fleet Foxes song. I don't know if this will shock you, but I don't watch a whole lot of anime. On screen, I'll put a collection of shows I've watched, but besides maybe Death Note and Eva, I don't think I need to be an expert in this stuff to say that what I watch isn't particularly mainstream. Very original, I know, but like, I just pick shows to watch at my own pace. Like, honestly, I think I prefer movies and OVAs over shows just because they're less of a time commitment and get to be more weird and experimental, especially 90s stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of cool shows out there that I'd watch if I was just willing to take the plunge into the fandom, but I don't know. Judging by what I've heard from some people, it's best to treat the anime fandom like African wildlife. Admire from a distance, but for the love of God, do not get within close range of it. And anyways, I'm a sicko. US politics is funny. Metal Gear Solid's pretty cool. Ace Combat really spoke to me. Burgers just be hitting different with a fork. I am not in 2/3 of these shows' demographics, and I just don't feel like much of this stuff caters to the things I'm into. But let me introduce you to the work of a certain Mamoru Oshii, one of the few directors whose work I actually simp for. You probably know him for directing the original Ghost in the Shell, not that garbage Scarlett Johansson one, and if you're a real OG, that one Elite Samurai short in the Halo Legends anime collection. And while these are certainly great works, I'm not talking about them today because, honestly, what more could I add to one of the best cyberpunk films ever made that's practically been turned into video essay cannon fodder today? And I don't want the title of this video to be, so like, what is transhumanism actually? And as for the Halo short, just go watch Cody's video instead, it's pretty good. So I picked 3 relatively obscure films to talk about today. Some of the themes are connected and overlapping in some ways, but mostly they're all independent of each other. You will need some background to understand the deeper politics of 2 of these movies, so in order to do that painlessly and without you passing on to me, I'm gonna warp us over to reality land, i.e. my bedroom. Skip to this timestamp on screen if you're a nerd like me who already knows all this stuff. Or don't. I don't know, if you like the sound of my voice, you can stay, I guess. Transition. Hello, I'm indeed real, and I'm not a schizophrenic delusion. I know, it shocks even me sometimes. You know, if you toned up the educational bit of this and toned down maybe the questionable opinions on the Yugoslav wars, I'd actually be like DJ Peach Cobbler right now. Oh my god, I just realized that. Anyway, you know what they say. You either die talking about Battlefield, or live long enough to yap about the Meiji Restoration. Speaking of which, the Meiji Restoration, what was it? Basically, it was a time period in Japanese history from the mid to late 19th century in which Japan, who prior to this was a closed-off and feudal nation, quickly industrialized into one of the biggest powers in all of East Asia, defeating both China and Russia humiliatingly in war and posing a serious threat to U.S. interests in the region. I'd argue it's probably one of the biggest, most influential events in human history, seeing it was one of the first times an Eastern power really came into its own and made it to the post-industrial club. So Japan made the jump from pre-industrialized to post-industrialized very quickly, and it had some hiccups along the way too. One of the immediate consequences was Japan rapidly militarized, and their military became one of the best in the world, and even quickly rivaled even those in Europe, especially their navy. So Japan's military kind of infighting and kind of soft overthrow of the government in the 30s and how Japanese democracy fell is a really interesting subject I don't really want to get into here. Kraut has a really good video on it if you want to go into a deeper discussion of that. I'm not going to go into it here though, but it is a very good video. Basically, Bushido nationalism, goofy railroad bombings, just stuff like that. Very fun to talk about, but not the place for it. So I'm pretty sure you know the rest. From here, basically Japan's military overthrows the government, does the funny in China, has an oil embargo placed on it by the US, because obviously doing the funny is cringe, I know, what a shocker. And then they do Pearl Harbor. And then we do back to them. And then we do it again. So, I'm sure you can guess after 2... Japan wasn't in the best shape. Part of the US brokered peace deal with Japan was Article 9 of their constitution. Basically, this barred Japan from ever possessing things like aircraft carriers, bomber fleets, nuclear weapons. So, quickly a dogma of peace kind of became the norm through Japanese culture, and this is often reflected in a lot of their media. And I find that really interesting. And one of the best examples is Patlabor 2 is the second film in the Patlabor franchise, which is larger, massive manga, anime OVAs, TV series, crappy famicom games, and theatrical films created by Headgear and started in the late 80s. Got all that? Good. The series is a mecha that takes place in the then near future of the late 90s and early 2000s. The namesake labors of the series are these massive 3-story mechs that originally were designed to help with construction and infrastructure projects, but later evolved into being accepted into military and police service. Now, I've only seen Patlabor 2, but from what I got out of the movie, it kind of forgets that it's a mecha for most of the runtime. Like, you could cut out most of the scenes involving them, replace it with some other military technology, and the story would mostly be unaffected. The story of this movie specifically revolves around the Special Vehicle Unit Section 2, a division of the Tokyo Police armed with specialized labors made for law enforcement use. After a series of terrorist attacks in Tokyo Bay, 2 members of SV2, Nagamo and Goto, investigate the attack unofficially and uncover some truth that some parties might not want to get out to the public. While the main plot is a gripping political thriller, I think it's almost illegal to dive into this film without looking at its incredible opening first. The film fades into a scene of a squad of JSDF laborers doing UN peacekeeping work in Southeast Asia, before getting intercepted by a group of hostile armored vehicles. The leader of the squad, a man named Suge, who later becomes the film's antagonist, goes on his radio and practically begs his superiors for the clearance to fire. It's denied, and he's simply told to hunker down and wait for reinforcements. This refusal to get involved leads to all of Suge's squad mates to be eliminated by the hostiles, one by one, with him being the final survivor. This opening scene shows us just what Suge hates about the SDF and Japan's petty bureaucracy at large, and gives him the motivation for the actions he takes later on in the film. The film has this theme of anti-petty office politics throughout, and more at large calls out Japan for how it seemingly has a sense of superiority to other nations, thinking that it's solved the problem of war by not getting involved in Western-backed military policing operations, while still benefiting from the very clear involvement it criticizes. It also exposes Japan for how this near century of not firing a bullet in aggression has possibly led to its military falling into apathy and ill-prepared for what a world of modern warfare would have it face. This is shown toward the middle of the film, wherein Suge's master plan is initiated and a mock attack is commenced on Tokyo, beginning with attack helicopters destroying SV2's labors and SDF's comms array, and a blimp filled with seemingly a chemical agent is sent crashing into the street before the gas is discovered to be harmless. The SDF being helpless to all this, bumbling its way through all of it, and showing its seeming incompetence. All of this while Goto and Nagamo are being interrogated by their superiors for unofficially investigating the series of attacks Japan has been facing recently. All the while, it's happening right outside the police force's office. Truly, the definition of irony. Oshii has stated before in interviews that any belief that Suge may have is one that he holds as well. It's Suge's means to an end that he disagrees with. Several of the higher-up government officials in the film really only seek to escalate the situation in order to further progress their career for personal benefit, either obliviously or sadistically worsening the situation in the end. Suge's hatred of Japan's bureaucratic and blissfully ignorant military structure is what leads him to commit these acts, and to get his message out there, and to make Japan well known that it isn't untouchable. And that's what I think Patlabor 2 is trying to say. That it empathizes with his villain's reasoning for his actions, but also says change must come through diplomacy and peaceful means. There's this scene halfway through the movie where JG-SDF troops are deployed throughout Tokyo after the police force basically collapses after they get blamed by bureaucrats for a situation that happened earlier in the film. It's incredibly haunting seeing otherwise what is a normal city under martial law where troops are defending against a sort of invisible threat while people are just trying to live their lives. The more personal aspect of Oshii's filmmaking is more present in the other works I'll talk about today, but here they just make a small but lasting impression. He's great at these small, centered works where the focus is on a connection between characters. Kinda like a fairy tale. Jin-Roh, The Wolf Brigade is the third film in the Kerberos saga, a much larger media franchise started in the 80s. The Kerberos saga was one of Oshii's first works, and is really only remembered for Jin-Roh, as Oshii himself has openly criticized the earlier films of the saga. And it's, not really hard to see why. The sad thing about this movie is that it appears to have been discovered by the edgy 14-year-old little dark age edit Sigma male Patrick Bateman crowd, which has unfortunately retroactively soured my taste of the film, but moving on. The film is set in a post-war 1950s Japan in an alternate timeline where the nation ended up siding with the Allies, but still fell to the Nazis. The government installed by the Germans really only leads to more political chaos in the country as left-wing terrorism and anti-government sentiment gain popularity with the general public. We drop right into the midst of a riot, where a guerrilla faction known as the Sect is running bombs through the Tokyo sewers to the front line through a set of couriers, one of which being a 14-year-old girl by the name of Nanami Agawa. On the opposite side of the aisle lies Kazuki Fusei, a member of the Capitol Police's anti-terrorist unit Kerberos. They're doing a routine sweep of the sewers during the riot, fully kitted out in power armor dubbed the Protector Suit. Quick side note on the Protect suit, I couldn't find any sources online, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if the armor later went on to inspire the enemies in the modern Wolfenstein games as well as the Hellghast from Killzone. Side note over. The Kerberos units quickly overwhelm any sect members they find, and Nanami uses this time to try and escape from the soldiers. But it's too late. She finds herself face to face with Kazuki in the sewers where they both stare at each other, not moving an inch. Kazuki's unit yells at him to fire, but his finger doesn't pull the trigger of his weapon. He just stands there. Nanami, coming to her senses, looks at the satchel charge she's clutching, and primes it to blow. This single mistake, if you can even call it that, is what sets off everything else that happens in the film from this point onwards. Kazuki managed to survive the incident, but is court-martialed by his superiors for it, and is sentenced back to training, being removed indefinitely from his unit. But he can't stop thinking about Nanami. Everywhere he goes, she pops up in visions as he's just trying to live his life and continue on as normal. In this sense, Jin-Roh is kind of similar with the Skycrawlers, as unlike Patlabor, they're more focused on the personal aspects of conflict and the effects they have on the people who fight them, though Jin-Roh is more of a reflection on someone living with the effects after, and Skycrawlers is more about personal relations juxtaposed with conflict. Anyway, one day Kazuki decides to go to Nanami's school as some sort of repentance for his sins, and finds a girl there praying to a memorial made for Nanami. They strike a conversation with each other, where it's revealed that the girl's actually Nanami's sister, a girl named Kei. She surprisingly forgives Kazuki for his actions, and this little bit of humanity comforts Fusei, in a way a man who's been trained to be a cold-hearted killing machine rarely ever gets. They form an informal friendship and begin roaming around Tokyo together, sharing stories, while Kei reminisces about the past with Nanami. But taking a step away from this quickly, I wanted to discuss the sort of side plot of the Little Red Riding Hood story in this film. During the time Kazuki and Kei spend together, she gives him a book of the fairy tale. Very cliche film thing to do, I know, but the story is a tool that the movie uses for its themes of good and evil. The film uses Kazuki to portray a wolf, mercilessly killing his prey, while Kei and Nanami are Little Red Riding Hoods, innocently wandering along. Even if Nanami and Kei have a body count probably several times higher than Kazuki through their couriership of bombs. There's literally a scene about 2/3 through the movie where Kazuki is pursuing Kei through the sewers with a pack of wolves in a dream, and Kei is dressed up in a Little Red Riding Hood costume. Subtlety, never heard of it! Anyways, all of this is interrupted when it's revealed that the Public Security Division has been trying to destroy Kerberos by framing one of its members, which through circumstances just so happens to be Kazuki. Government infighting, my favorite flavor of conspiracy. Oh yeah, did I mention that Kei was actually working for public security as a mole, trying to get into Kerberos? She was planted specifically at Nanami's memorial just to take advantage of an emotionally distraught Kazuki. She was a former bomb runner who got arrested, but entered a plea deal with public security to be a part of their plot. Like, she's not even Nanami's sister, they just look similar. The plot culminates in Kei making a phone call to Kazuki at a museum, appearing to be in distress in order to draw him out there. She would then give him a backpack, making it appear as if she was delivering a bomb to him, discrediting the whole organization of Kerberos. Kazuki, obviously knowing what's up, sneaks in and rescues Kei while dodging the public security goons coming after him. They make it out alive in a car and ride off into the sunset. Kei confesses her feelings to Kazuki, saying that she'll run off with him and never turn back to public security again. Kazuki, however, may be feeling betrayed or ignorant, refuses, instead taking Kei with him into the sewers to hide. It's then revealed that Kazuki, as well as other members of Kerberos, were aware of public security's plot to defraud them, and so planted a tracker on Kei, leading them right into the sewers. Right where Kazuki wants them. After getting fully suited up, Kazuki gets prepared for 7 minutes of pure carnage. After killing the leader of public security, Kei and Kazuki, as well as the remaining members of Jin-Roh, retreat back to a scrapyard. Kazuki is told that he can't take Kei with him, and that, like a wolf, she needs to put down as she is a loose end. Kazuki can't bring himself to tie it up. Kei pleads with him, reciting the fairy tale she told him earlier, but an order's an order, and he doesn't make the same mistake twice. Jin-Roh isn't a happy movie. People disconnected from reality, their life filled with warfare, were obviously going to have to make adjustments when returning back to civilian life. What Kazuki saw in the sewers took an entire film's length for him to truly reckon with, but in the end, it was all for nothing. War changes people. Literally everyone who's ever served during a conflict, from Roman centurions to Mongolian cavalry to French musketeers to World War II GIs to people on the front lines in Ukraine today, will tell you that. People's bodies can be trained and conditioned for war all the way to the physical limit, but show me a man who's trained his psyche for war, and you'll show me a husk. The Skycrawlers is a 2008 adult animated war film once again produced by Production IG and directed by Mamoru Oshii, based upon a novel series by Hiroshi Mori of the same name. The movie's probably Oshii's loudest anti-war flick, with him openly calling out industrialized and privatized warfare and the cycle of violence it brings in the film. Set in an alternate mid-20th century, sometime after World War II, humanity has achieved world peace, not through world federalization, but through, privatized competitive corporate warfare. Two rival corporations, new common general resource. Two rival corporations, Rostok and Lantern, have massive scores of aircraft that they send at and attack each other with on the weekly. How does this establish world peace? Well, in the words of Kusanagi, one of the film's main characters, having warfare constantly going on around the world reminds humanity of its deadly toll and why it needs to be avoided at all costs. I don't really follow her logic, as turning war into what is essentially Monday Night Football, where people can cheer for a corporation, buy the merch, and even go on tours of the air bases to meet the pilots firsthand, treating them more like celebrities than people whose lives boil down to getting as many kills in a dogfight until they die in combat, and have their bodies replaced with fresh meat. It doesn't really sound like making people terrified of war. Unless, wait, is the movie, trying to say something? Like, maybe turning the act of state-sanctioned killing to something that's fraternized on the home front is a bad thing, and turns what is probably humanity's greatest sin into something people are proud of? Nah, that can't be right. As we all know, anime never tries to push an agenda down your throat. Look at all these cool things from Japan that are 100% apolitical and not trying at all to be social commentary whatsoever. Speaking of the pilots, they aren't your ordinary Tom Cruise or Han Solo. They're, presumed genetically cloned immortal teenagers known as Children, created by these companies to pilot these warbirds. Get it? It's Children. Because they're children. But they kill people? Ladies and gentlemen, Mamoru Oshii, the king of subtlety. Children might as well not even have names, as according to themselves, they have hardly any identity or memory of their past lives. For some, this realization causes an existential crisis, realizing they can never truly escape the cycle of violence, and to others, they accept the role they were given and don't put in much thought as to why they fight. Speaking of our two main characters, we have Yuichi. He's the new guy at the Rostok base who just got there, and is a vessel for the audience to experience the world of this movie. Then we have Kusanagi, commander of the squadron Yuichi just arrived at, and also a Children. Children who last in battle get promoted to the status that she's at, showing that she has quite a bit of experience under her belt. There are other characters who have distinct personalities, but I watched this movie subbed, and their names are escaping me at the moment, and also the wiki is more barren than the Mojave, so excuse me please. I don't really want to linger much on the main story, as while it is very good, the time loop narrative and the world of the film are way more interesting to talk about. Another cool thing? Some of the best 2D and 3D CGI integration I've ever seen in any animated film. If you do decide to watch this film, please do so on your biggest TV with a $500 sound system, just because the aerial combat scenes in this film rock. It really does just take a page right out of Ace Combat's book by saying, war is bad, but planes are rad. But back to the themes we have at hand. So if the whole cloning metaphor wasn't obvious enough, Oshii is commenting on how especially prolonged warfare leads to an endless cycle of violence that sees all parties involved suffer to an extent, and is near impossible to escape from. While that's very bleak, the ending of the film gives the characters at least some hope of breaking the cycle. During the third act, after Yuichi learns he's a clone of a skilled Rostock pilot who came before him, he basically contemplates on any method possible on what he could do. Kusanagi admits to killing Yuichi in his former life as another pilot upon his request, and asks him to return the favor. He refuses, and says that the only way to break the cycle is to keep on living. The following morning, Yuichi is scrambled after there are reports of an enemy plane above the base, one of them planes happening to be that of the teacher, the most accomplished ace of Lottern, and a clone off the same DNA of that of Yuichi. As a form of symbolic rebellion, the normally closed-off and non-confrontational Yuichi engages the teacher in an epic drawn-out dogfight between the two masters of the skies. And Yuichi gets absolutely obliterated. And now, to quote a YouTube comment I found from 8 years ago. I think that what makes this kill more unique out of any of the other teacher's kills in this movie is not only that the protagonist is the only other person in the movie capable of pulling off the Bagashev's Cobra maneuver, but is how the teacher continues to fire into the protagonist's plane well after he's dead. Someone thought that the teacher killed his clones out of sympathy, but I disagree. While Konami pulled off the aforementioned maneuver, the teacher immediately recognized Konami as one of his own clones. However, the teacher has learned some new tricks after he switched over to Lottern, and the Rostock pilot is killed with after a maneuver that hasn't been seen before in the movie. After the teacher kills Konami, he continues to fire into his plane, covering in holes like Swiss cheese. This isn't consistent with the teacher's behavior earlier in the movie. The teacher will usually move on after killing off a Rostock pilot. But this one, he wastes his bullets on. Is it because he's terrified of his own clones, and he wants to make sure that Konami is dead, or is it a form of self-hatred? Does the teacher hate Konami just like he hates himself? The movie never explains what goes on inside the mind of the teacher. So that's basically it. 3 films that I think are pretty cool and you should check out. Or not, since I basically spoiled all of them. But you saw the warning, so don't complain about it in the comments. But on another note, I have now watched Eva, am currently in the middle of Code Geass, and want to watch 86, so maybe another one of these media analysis videos is down the road one of these days. Anyways, I have another Christmas video loaded in the chamber, so be on the lookout for that when it's out. It won't be as big as last year's, but it'll be a similar subject, and I actually don't hate it, so that's nice. That'll be all. This has been the Bouldercast, clocking out.